The Everything Sequel podcast is brought to you by Brew Bar and 2T Fitness.
The Everything Sequel podcast contains explicit language, and I will not go to my room. Michael Shantz here of the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, the man who's got you in his sights, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Say hello, Tom.
You meet a better class of people in the dark sometimes. Now, if someone said that to me as I was entering their apartment for a sexual liaison,
Right?
I would turn around and run a mile.
Walk the fuck out.
That was the first time I thought about tightrope.
Was it? Yeah, right.
It's like, oh, what is this the movie where it's revealed Dirty Harry is also a sexual serial killer?
And he had to leave San Francisco and move to New Orleans under an assumed name.
I think we'll have a lot to say about Sonny.
Well, and the funny part is that that's what John Milius had to say the most about. That's what pissed him off the most. I think I mentioned in our last episode that he hated this movie more than any other movie. And it was like that specifically really drove him nuts.
Well, good for him.
Yeah. He said, Dirty Harry doesn't have girlfriends. Dirty Harry...
I thought it was because it was fucking racist to Asian people.
Oh, of course not. No.
Oh, okay. Okay, I forgot who was talking. Is it John Milius, the director of Red Dawn, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, he doesn't give a shit about other countries.
No.
Oh,
so
can you
funny.
imagine how smug John Milius is? John Milius still alive now?
I think he might be.
If he lived to the Russian-Ukraine war, he must be so smug now.
Right.
It's like, I fucking told you. I fucking told you, these fucking Russians.
Oh, that's great.
And this is not a digression because he is the co-screenwriter
Right.
of this movie.
Maybe we should have mentioned that.
It was a surprise to me, as was seeing Michael Cimino's name.
Oh, yeah, is that right?
Yeah, Cimino.
Oh, of course it was. What am I saying? You hadn't watched any of these movies.
Well, I feel like even if I'd seen this movie, I wouldn't necessarily remember that it was written by two of the premier auteur directors of the 70s and 80s.
That's great. All right, friends. Well, we are talking about the 1973 sequel, Magnum Force, the first in the Dirty Harry series. First sequel, that is. Mm-hmm. And it's directed by Ted Post.
Wow.
Tom and I know.
We have done it, yes, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Ted Post. And it was...
Hang 'em High.
Hang 'em High, right. So he has Eastwood previous, too.
Right.
What's fascinating to me right off the bat about Ted Post, I think I said when we did Beneath the Planet of the Apes that in the Apes documentary that I watched,
mm-hmm.
there was a level of disappointment that he was directing the sequel to Planet of the Apes. This sense that he was nothing more than a workman-like journeyman director. And when we watch Beneath the Planet of the Apes, that the second half of that movie is completely avant-garde.
Right.
And I feel like
this movie,
the same thing here. He's making so many interesting visual camera work choices throughout this movie that really you cannot take the style of this movie for granted. And
not for a second.
Absolutely.
I started wondering, even at the beginning of this movie, I started wondering, when did we start attaching cameras to shit?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't have said earlier than Mean Streets, but I was wrong.
Right. So when that motorcycle is pulling over that car and the camera is attached to the back right side of the motorcycle, and then you're getting those interesting mirror shots.
Oh, it's he's really interesting experimental directorial style, which we saw in Beneath the Planet of the Apes as well. So even though the name Ted Post doesn't seem to inspire confidence from the people working around
I'm starting to wonder why.
I'm starting to learn that that it's as much a guarantee that you're going to get something interesting as seeing, Eastwood or Milius
Sure.
or Strumino. So it totally, I mean, I was excited when I saw it, and by the end of the film, I would be even more excited to see another Ted Post film at some point that I'd never seen. So there we go. That's Ted Post.
This has been Ted Post Corner. So this movie is the high watermark in terms of reviews out of all the sequels.
Yeah.
70% on Rotten Tomatoes.
It's good.
Had an open. I couldn't find any information on a budget for this movie. But an opening weekend of $6.8 million, and it made $39.7 million in the USA and the world. So certainly, by early 70s standards, I mean, this movie made money. It was a hit.
Yeah, and it's definitely, from the title sequence onwards, you can see that it's riding the reputation of the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
It was clear to me that Dirty Harry was and must have been, even if I didn't know this, must have been an instantly iconic movie, because the sequel, even 2 years later, treats it as an iconic property.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, we were kind of gushing about this movie.
Yeah.
During our ranking process.
Mm-hmm.
How far into this movie were you when you started thinking, wow?
Oh, second one.
Yeah. Okay.
And this has nothing to do with the movie, but it was the logo that started to put me in that frame of mind. It's
old Warner Brothers.
Well, it's easy to forget because we've gone full circle with the Warner Brothers logo. Like the latest version of it is a version of the oldest version of it.
Yeah, I don't like that version, by the way.
Oh no, it's horrible.
Yeah.
But in terms of the graphic, it's a riff on the original Warner Brothers logo from the up until I guess like the late 60s. They were using the golden curved WB.
Yeah.
But this is a very modernist looking logo. It's like a piece of brutalist architecture in graphic form.
Yeah.
And so and for when you're about to watch a police procedural from the 70s, it fits really nicely.
Yeah, it does.
That kind of grittiness. And then we get into
white on black on red.
Yeah, and then we go into the the same, and we're using the same colors as we get in the titles, which really helps.
Right.
And this title sequence is funky, it's colorful, it's of the time in the best possible way. The best qualities of being dated.
I also found it remarkable that because you can tell that there's just somebody holding a fucking gun.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the fact that it's a
in
slow
real time.
Zoom in,
on
the
slow
gun,
zoom,
and and
I was very surprised. I don't know why, but I was so surprised because I assumed I was going to see the gun fire. I didn't know it was going to turn towards me.
Really, you didn't see that coming?
No, I thought I was going to see like the slow. Cocking of the hammer as you're slowly pulling the trigger.
Like the Batman logo. We go
right
in reverse.
Yeah.
But
of course you get the iconic dialogue from the first movie.
Right.
So you already get that little callback.
Well, yeah, that's it. The fact that it turns out to be an imbas.
Yeah.
Is the cherry on the cake.
It's just like it's like.
But also,
great.
that even as early as 1973, that's Dirty Harry's catchphrase at this point.
Mm-hmm.
That line is as celebrated as it will later be, even in
but
1973.
The amazing thing is, it's not going to end up being his most memorable catchphrase.
No, it'll be surpassed by Sudden Impact. But
yeah,
for a contingent of fandom, that is the Dirty Harry line. Right. But also, just the bold honesty of this opening sequence, because this and all the Dirty Harry movies are essentially gun porn.
Yeah.
So to begin with a title which is a celebration of the gun in all its glory,
Right.
basically it sets the right expectations for this movie, which will have, semi pornographic scenes involving guns.
Well, and let's continue talking about credits because I think we talked in our last episode about this series sort of inventing sequel conventions, maybe.
Yeah, definitely.
And what I found interesting was that this movie has a title sequence and then a cold open.
Yeah.
The next movie has a cold open and then the title sequence. And then the movie after that goes back to a title sequence followed by a cold open.
And am I right in thinking, I'll have to recheck my notes, but is it the Deadpool or Sudden Impact that has a scene in between the titles?
I think it's Deadpool.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
because I remember
that really just adds to what you're saying about mixing it up.
I had that note where we had credits and then something happened and then I was like, hey, more credits.
Yeah. I know. Exactly. And as I said, it's impossible not to get excited from the names you're seeing. Holbrook, Ryan, David Soul. I mean, pre-Skarsky and Hutch, David Soul.
Right.
Milius, Cimino, Lalo Schifrin.
Right. And people even there are a few character actors that we know now that maybe we wouldn't have known there, the Tim Mathesons and the Robert Urich,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know if it would have the same impact then as it does now.
Right.
I mean, Holbrook still hasn't done All the President's Men, right?
Sure.
At this point, so maybe there's a few. There has to, and obviously pre-Skarsky and Hutch, you probably don't even know who David Soul is.
Sure.
But to me, in 2022, I'm drooling at the prospect of seeing all these actors on screen. I really am. Yeah, it's a fantastic. I mean, talk about beginning on a high.
Right. Well, and I think what it says
it's
more than anything.
Opening.
Yeah. Well, and I was talking still in terms of all of our actors, because it says something about casting too.
Yes.
When you have Tim Matheson and you have David Soul, and he's a few years away from Starsky and Hutch, and we're, 5 years away from Animal House. And yet somebody could see the benefit of these actors and what they would contribute to a movie.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like you look back. It's true of all these movies, but particularly this movie, just because of the sheer volume of this kind of thing. It's where all these actors will continue to represent quality throughout their career. So there's no point in history you can't look back and they not represent quality character acting.
Sure.
I don't know what point that becomes like a guarantee, but we're certainly past that, because as soon, when I saw all these names together, I cummed in my pants, basically. But we start on a high, and I think that kind of continues into the first scene, which is a basic sort of expositional dump, but filmed in such a kinetic way that it's really interesting to watch.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, it's like basically Ted Post is treating it as an action scene, even though it's all dialogue. The first thing we see is like a member of the press being literally knocked over as as this mobster leaves the court. And, the scene is obviously performing a number of functions. It's giving us exposition. It's reminding us of what the theme of the movie is. The justice system is set up to let murderers go free.
Right.
That's what we've established from the first movie. That's our starting point here.
Yeah.
Not our end point, but it's our starting point.
Yeah.
So we're doing all these, we're doing all these things, but with all this point of view camera work, like you say, strapping cameras to people and vehicles. It's a really distinctive modern style, which probably Don Siegel is not doing in the previous movie, because he's a traditionalist, a great traditionalist, but a traditionalist.
But I was struck by as the mobster's coming down the stairs and the choices that Ted Post is making in terms of, I mean, how right on top of it he is.
Right. Yeah, you feel like you're in the middle of a protest, which is
right.
probably what he's
and
going
that's
for.
what really struck me was that you feel inside of it, but then the last shot is a long shot, and you're watching one of the protesters chase the limousine in a sort of frantic kind of a way. And so I was struck by juxtaposing those shot choices and just how interesting it was to watch.
And you're right, and I think that's the other thing that impresses me about Ted Post is that he can do the basics very well. Because there's some great moments later on in the movie where you see that everything's been done in one shot with kind of depth of field and width of frame, and it really pays off. And so he's not style for style's sake, which is probably why people think he's a journeyman director. But then but he's able to add these really inventive visual choices into the mix, which to me as a director is win-win. But maybe that doesn't always translate because he also doesn't just do things for the sake of being flashy.
Yeah.
And your example that you're using there is absolutely right.
Right.
It's interesting, because we get the, someone shouts, "Fuck the courts." We get the news report that this mobster's been, let off the hook for murder, that he definitely did.
Yeah.
So we're starting where we left off. We're picking up philosophically where we left off at the end of Dirty Harry, in regards to the justice system. But then immediately we see
he's taken his note of resignation and torn it up and said,
right,
"I'm sticking around to clean these streets up."
I have questions about that resignation note. But then immediately we get, the patrol cops killing this, someone
he's just left the courthouse.
Yeah. Killing this person of interest. And, immediately the idea of vigilantism in the series has shifted.
Yeah.
I guess at this point we don't know whether they're pretending to be a police officer or not. But, already that idea of the maverick cop, the meaning of that has changed in this one sequence.
Right.
So it's not like that.
There's Dirty Harry, and then there's breaking the law.
Right. And
that's the thing that's interesting to me about this series and this movie especially is the idea of justice.
Yeah.
I mean, Dirty Harry himself has lines like, it's okay to shoot people so long as you're shooting the right people, And I think Dirty Harry's mindset became America's mindset for how we view justice, which is incredible to think about.
Yeah.
The influence that this character has had on how we literally view justice in this country. Because I think his mindset is still the mindset for most Americans.
Right. And it's fascinating. I mean, also, straight away the movie makes... It's interesting to me, this movie doesn't mess about when it comes to making its political attitudes clear. Because not only will we see the cop kill this person who has been declared innocent by the courts, we then get Harry and Lieutenant Briggs agreeing with what they've done.
Yeah,
Like they verbally say, "I would have done this myself. I wish I'd have done this. This saved the taxpayers a lot of money."
Sure.
So immediately, police are in this nebulous kind of zone between criminals and agents of the law. And this is all in like the first 10 minutes of the movie.
Yes. And, well, not only that, so after that murder and after the talking about it, you have Mitchell Ryan show up.
Right.
Which I think is a fascinating scene in and of itself because there is something going on with the idea of juxtaposing who Harry wants dead and what Harry's willing to do in service of the law.
Right.
And when he's confronted with Mitchell Ryan, who seems frantic and crazy and Mitchell Ryan seems to represent what the general public who complained about Dirty Harry movies thought of Dirty Harry himself. And yet it's in this scene that Dirty Harry is saying, hey, why don't you take a desk job?
Yeah.
Hey, why don't you put in for your papers? You've had a nice long career. He is being the most reasonable person. And it's like he can see what's wrong with Mitchell Ryan. And he's saying you shouldn't be on the streets. It's really interesting to me.
What is also, I mean, it feeds into what this movie does again and again, which is something of a contradiction. Simultaneously softens the image of Harry whilst darkening it.
Yeah.
So he's allied to the villain's point of view explicitly throughout the movie.
Yeah.
He philosophically agrees with what they're doing, but we've also made attempts to make him more family-oriented, to make it look like he cares about other people. As far as I remember it, the whole point of Dirty Harry, of Harry Callahan in the original movie, he doesn't like other people. He's a complete misanthrope. And that immediately changes here.
And yet,
because of his care
this
and
movie, I
concern
think,
for
where you
Mitchell Ryan.
see a picture of his wife in his little small apartment.
Yeah.
I do remember in the first Dirty Harry movie, like right at the beginning of the movie, there's some cop that says, hey, you should tell your wife or something of your wife. And he goes, sorry, Harry. So you have that information that he was married and then she died.
Right.
And then he became this.
Yeah.
You know?
But he's unprompted, he sees that Mitchell Ryan's, in emotional trouble.
Yeah.
And he goes to see his wife and kids.
Exactly. Right.
And doesn't sleep with her, which is a big deal in 1973.
Right. But what did you think about the fact that because he gets a call?
Oh, yeah. It's sort of like, I think because
what would have happened?
But later in the movie, it's made clear that he's not doing it out of principle.
Yeah, you're right. Okay.
When they're at the airport, it's very clear.
But he does let her kiss him, and I just remember I wrote a note that said, what was Harry going to do?
No, I think if it had left it at that scene, that would have been my reading too. But at the airport, I think it's made very clear that there's some things that even I am not willing to do.
Right.
There's still sanctity around certain things like marriage that I'm not willing to break. But we've skipped over something huge here.
Okay.
And I don't want it to disappear.
Yes.
The snack bar at the airport.
Oh.
So like, did you?
You're right. You're right. We did skip over it.
Do you think this is a little convenient? That
I gotta tell you
that an airport-based set piece begins with Harry saying, there's this great snack bar at the airport. Where all the great snack bars are. It's like, what
I would like to do is endure everything I have to endure at the airport to get myself a burger.
Right. It's like, you mean before you go into security? No, just at the gate. Yeah. We're going to go all the way through.
Right.
And I just love watching in 2022, the pre-9/11 logic of that.
Yes.
We're just going to roll up at the airport for a snack.
And I got to tell you, there is no person in human history who happens upon more robberies and crimes than Dirty Harry Callahan.
And this is,
holy shit. That guy can't walk 5 fucking feet without witnessing a violent crime.
And this is a very recognizable sequel trait, isn't it? We're essentially reworking or reenacting a scene from the first movie, but we're upping the stakes. Mm-hmm. So if you see this as the equivalent of the "Do you feel lucky" scene, which also begins in like a lunch counter.
Yeah. And that one he's eating a hot dog, and this one he's eating a burger.
He's eating a burger, but and in that one, he's taking down a street criminal. In this one, he's thwarting hijackers on a passenger plane. In that one, in that one he's bluffing about the number of bullets he has in his gun.
Right.
In this one he's bluffing that he can fly a plane.
Which he actually starts
He
pushing
actually
forward.
starts to fly the plane until, in one of the best moments in this series, he says, "You know, you better take over because I don't know what I'm doing."
Oh, there's nothing better than that co-pilot saying, "Excuse me, Captain. I don't mean to be a problem, but can you fly?"
So I think.
But, and I already referenced this in our previous episode, but Clint Eastwood, upon finding out that there are terrorists on a plane, while still stuffing his face with a burger, saying, "Can I make a suggestion?" Like, you realize in that moment the degree to which he can handle comedy.
And I'd say, on the film's behalf, like, part of the brief is to make it twice as fun.
Yeah, right.
Like, the previous movie, it's kind of fun. Like in Dirty Harry, when that scene's kind of fun. But here, he poses as a pilot. He actually gets on the plane. He's making jokes. It's like, it's bigger, it's more pantomime. They're having fun with it.
Right.
In a way that's almost like, well, it's a sequel. We need to have twice the fun.
It's great.
It really, even though the setup is so tenuous.
Right.
I really appreciate that it's in the movie.
Me too. All right, that's a good start. Why don't we take a break and then we'll come back? How about that?
Sure, and then we've got to address the other.
If you're anything like me, you spend the majority of the day wondering whether you want coffee, beer, or wine. Whichever way you fall, Brew Bar has you covered. Located in the heart of 3rd Avenue Village in glorious downtown Chula Vista, California, which is also my neck of the woods, Brew Bar is a coffee shop, bar, and eatery rolled into one delightful package. Tim and Alex run the place, and let me tell you, listeners, these guys know their coffee. And after you've been in their company, so will you. They turned me on to pour over, and it's literally all I drink now. If for some crazy reason you don't want to try the best coffee in the world, they've got espresso drinks, all kinds of teas, and even coffee cocktails. You heard me? Coffee tails. And we're just getting started. Bottle service on craft beer and wine, alcoholic and caffeinated potions, an all-day food menu with plenty of vegan options. All served up in an atmosphere hip enough to know you're getting the best quality, but not too hip that you feel the need to drive to 7-Eleven and get a bucket of brown swill. Brew Bar. It's the best place to be for beer, wine, coffee, and tea. And if you go, you might even see me.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here discussing the 1973 sequel, Magnum Force, the first of the Dirty Harry sequels. All right, Tom, you've got a bee in your bonnet.
No, I want to get your read on something. So, and this is again something we've talked about before, how to address something by not addressing it. And
that didn't happen.
Harry Callahan visibly resigns at the end of Dirty Harry. And I think it's clear that they are a little uneasy about admitting that happened in the way he's introduced in this movie. First of all, he gets a very inconspicuous entrance. He just sort of slips into the scene almost as if, they don't want you to notice that he's still a police officer. And I thought they were gonna make it part of the scene because everyone's going, "Hey, I'm surprised to see you here, Harry. Hey, what are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Oh, because he's back on the force." No, because he was
transferred, right?
It's been retconned that he was transferred and somewhat demoted by going to as a. Oh, by the way,
he's on stakeout duty.
Remember when we did another stakeout and I said, I don't think there's such a thing as a stakeout specialist?
Apparently.
This movie proved me wrong.
Right.
Apparently there's a whole stakeout squad.
Squad just for stakeouts. That was the first time I think I've ever heard that.
And then it's implied that it was his police brutality that led to him being transferred. which everyone considers to be a demotion. Which I kind of like because it means there's some sort of continuity and consequence for what happened in the previous movie.
Sure.
But it also ignores the fact that he resigned. I remember that because I not only remember that because it's a pretty striking image, I also remember it because it's how High Noon ends as well. And when I started to go, hey, that's how High Noon ends. So no one's forgetting this happened, right? It's so iconic that they borrowed it from something else that was iconic. Right. And so I just think throughout this movie, they're kind of, they make a big thing of him later on in the movie being put back on homicide. And, throughout this movie, people are threatening to can him.
Yeah. Well, in all of these movies.
He resigned! What threat is this to a man who's already resigned? Yeah. So it's really interesting that, like, they come up with...
Which movie is it? Is it the next movie where he says, hey, what if I resign? And they're like, whoa, take it easy, all right? Like, come on. Nobody said anything like that.
So they kind of... They're unwilling to admit that this happened at the end of the last movie. And yet they're sort of... You can see them fudging and walking, like, tiptoeing around the issue. Yeah. It's like something has happened to Harry... It wasn't a full, it's like a kind of, it's like Harry talked to in between movies, Harry talked to his PR people, and they released a statement walking it back. And
right.
I know it looked like Harry resigned, but what actually happened was he was, we mutually agreed he would be transferred to the stakeout squad. It's really fascinating.
Well, it had
to me.
me wondering...
Is that because he doesn't want to be seen as a quitter? I don't know what's going on. Like, what's the message?
Well, I also had to wonder, has he been on the stakeout squad for 2 years now? Is that what I'm led to believe?
That's
or did this happen
I think.
2 weeks ago?
Because he was there because of what he did in Dirty Harry. That's
what I thought. But it also is strange that this gangster that just got off and he's murdered inside his own limousine.
Yeah. And
Harry happens upon the crime because he's close by. And then Hal Holbrook shows up and says, hey, what are you doing? You should be on the stakeout squad. He makes it almost sound like he's been on the... Remember you're on the stakeout squad? That place I put you last week? He makes it sound like it hasn't been that long of a time.
Right. All of which is redundant because he resigned.
That's amazing.
But what we do know is that he's still going down that firing range.
Oh, yeah. Now...
this is gun porn 101.
Big time.
Harry even holds the gun where his dick is. This movie's making no bones, pun intended, about...
What, the link between...
And how turned on is Harry by...
Oh, he's very excited.
David Soul's marksmanship. He's flushed in David Soul's presence.
He is a smitten kitten with these young cadets.
And then he says, if the rest of you could shoot as well as them, I wouldn't care if the whole damn department was queer.
Did you get that look from that beat cop?
I know. I have a note there that it's like homophobia 3 ways. First of all, we're using it to diagnose a psychopath.
Right.
Second, as a one-liner for Harry, and 3 with a comic button with the officer who gives him the dirty look.
Oh, fucking shit! Now let me ask you this though: the second, because this you're a great test case. The second you see all those motorcycle cops, aren't you thinking, well, those are our killers? They're all great shots and they're all close knit. Come on.
But I suppose, and I kind of like this about the movie. I think the mystery elements are underplayed. I think
they are, because they're going to reveal this 15 minutes from this point anyway. But
there's a couple of red herrings in there, which I think is all you kind of need. There's the fact that you think Mitchell Ryan's McCoy is the leader of the group or the main assassin of the group, which is, immediate. There's a scene in which that is very much disproved
Right.
in front of our eyes.
But
And
what
then,
I
of
couldn't
course,
figure out
the Hal Holbrook reveal at the end.
was Mitchell Ryan a part of the group?
The mystery is about who is the ringleader, not who are the killers. But that does. You've alluded to this already. It's like, why do their faces need to be so obscured?
Right.
And my theory about that is, I think this is like these are the proto slasher elements of the movie. This is like Italian giallo kind of iconography of the killer. And they are. It's fascinating to me that they are represented as something so sinister and shadowy,
Right.
and full-on assassins, war criminals, serial killers. That's how they're being represented in the movie. And
Because
those are the build.
Not only does he shoot the gangster, there's somebody else in the car, right? And the driver.
I think so. Oh yeah, there's a car full of people, and
then
you
when you
have
get to the swimming pool,
they're just killing they're machine gunning everyone.
Everyone.
Down.
Including a naked Suzanne Summers.
Of course, you noticed.
The fuck.
Um,
Also, by the way, you know who's in the protest at the beginning somewhere?
No.
Carl Weathers.
That is great news. So, yeah, I'm just sort of fascinated, and also the way that the movie is structured around a series of killings seems to me to lend itself to that kind of slasher idea. But I was really struck by that. This movie's really good at faking you out into believing certain people are the villains, when in fact the villainy comes from elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because we get a great one. Well, we actually see Harry at work in the stakeout squad, because they're sitting on a supermarket
or liquor store or something.
Yeah, with piñatas, because it's the mission.
Right.
I think, right. I also got to give this movie credit for how much it underplays the San Francisco-ness compared to the other movies.
It's one of my questions for you. This movie and setting it in San Francisco. Even that by itself is an interesting choice to me.
What, the series?
The series, I mean, I guess because you have the streets of San Francisco around that time as well, but it's just if you're going to have the rogue cop, you think of Popeye Doyle, and you.
But I actually think I think that is one of the interesting aspects of Dirty Harry, because it was originally set out as police versus hippies, and where's the hippiest dippy place on earth? It's San Francisco.
Right.
So I think it's all about making Harry more of a fish out of water.
Sure. Okay.
With this liberal culture that's developing around him. And this is what's interesting.
Well, to the point
because...
that by the time we get to Deadpool, the citizens of San Francisco were like, is this really what we want? Do we need this guy rolling around showing us that this is how cops work? It was like a thing about whether or not the city should allow them to be shooting.
That's interesting.
In the city.
Yeah. Because when the armed robbers that hold up the supermarket that Harry and his partner are sitting on, you initially think that these guys are evil hippies in the Scorpio mold.
Mm-hmm.
And then the blonde British gay one, who's the leader, more homophobia, punches a black woman in the face, and then uses racist terminology and makes it very explicit that he is a racist and that is why he's evil. And that just completely left field. It's like, he looks like a hippie, but he's a fascist.
Right.
And it's interesting that the movie does that with cops as well. It's like, here's your vigilante. They're essentially fascists.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting that the movie pulls that off in micro ways too, especially if you're used to the Andrew Robinson, Charles Manson
Sure, right.
version of a hippie psychopath.
Yeah.
Here, this is this guy is a Nazi.
Oh, well, and that's what's so interesting is also because you might not be seeing the faces of those killers, but you're seeing everything else. You're seeing...
They look like Gestapo.
I was just going to say, because they're motorcycle cops, they look like they're from the Gestapo.
Which is definitely deliberate.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's,
yeah.
They didn't really need to be patrol cops, I suppose,
and there's,
when you think about it.
I seem to remember that these movies got a lot of shit early on in terms of the violence, because, like, that pool scene party is visceral.
Yeah.
You know? The violence in these movies it really is pretty visceral.
Yeah, it's horror movie levels. I think it's really amping up the police procedural to be something of a horror, like a hybrid horror film.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah. This is probably the only point in the movie where I thought maybe Ted Post's camera work is getting a bit too frenetic for its own good, because there's a point where
the pool party
no, when we get to the supermarket.
Well, the supermarket.
Harry's chasing one of the gang, and there's a moment where the camera's moving so fast that even Eastwood can't keep up with it, and you see that him and the gang member arrive at different times,
right?
And it's almost like the camera is going so fast that even the actors can't catch up with what's going on.
Sure.
And I thought, yeah, but it also shows that Post is really pushing the boat. It's really pushing the envelope when it comes to camera mobility.
Yeah.
If like his actors can't keep up with how frenetic it is, and. Like my next, and again, we go almost straight into another killing, which is when the pimp murders one of his workers. Yeah. And again, I think
there's a huge controversy involving that scene too. There's another thing that John Milius hated about this movie. He wrote it as it was supposed to be talked about and never seen, and then apparently there was some sort of copycat murder in real life in which Drano was used, and so everybody blamed this movie.
Okay. Well, it's it's voyeurist.
Well, can we talk about the pimp?
Well, it's...
Because...
I'm gonna say nice things about this scene, because I actually think it's very complex what's going on.
Sure.
But I will cop to... It's voyeuristic. It's gratuitous violence in the horror mode that I never buy the copycat argument anyway. That's a conservative,
right.
That's conservative bullshit. It actually might have been better if it was talked about rather than seen. But given that it is seen, I think it's interesting how it's portrayed.
I agree,
because it sets you up to view the scene racistly. But when you come out of it, you end up realizing it's men of both races who are responsible for what happened to this woman. And also, it's not her fault. And I think that's a big deal, especially in this era of cinema, dealing with these kinds of characters.
That's interesting, yeah.
Like, we're not saying that there aren't pimps out there who are badly mistreating the women who work for them. I mean, that's just established. No one's going to pretend that's not happening. But the way in which it invokes the male gaze of the cabbie, and crucially when the cabbie runs away when she needs him, that to me, the meaning of the scene then changes. Which is not to say that they should have had it in at all. I can see why it is just, it's relishing that a little too much. I get that. But the message of the scene seems to me it's like, without the John, the pimp, and the guy in the cab who's letting it all happen, this woman would be safe.
Yeah.
Which seems to me a more complex viewpoint than perhaps you might get at the beginning of the scene when you get this woman like flaunting her money, the welfare queen stereotype, then the pimp comes in, this kind of blaxploitation archetype, and you're like, oh my god, this is going to be terrible. And then at the end of the scene I'm going, it's terrible, but it's terrible because of what happens to her and what men have done to her to make this happen. That's what I got from the scene. But when it starts out, I have to say I did start to sweat a little bit.
Well, and on top of it, the pimp is played by Albert Popwell, and this guy is in every fucking one of these movies but one.
Yeah.
Including the original Dirty Harry.
Characters every time. Yeah.
And the only reason he's not in Deadpool is because there was a scheduling conflict. They wanted him again. But this is something we've been talking about lately.
Yeah. It is. We've had a lot of examples, haven't we?
Where
it's the
somebody's
idea
coming in and playing multiple different characters. We, fairly recently we were doing the Blade series.
Yeah.
And you've got a guy in 2 movies playing different characters. And this guy is a different character in every single movie.
Chris Farley as well in the Wayne's World movies. It feels more like a repertory company.
Right.
Than a legacy cast. Right. It's the idea that the actors are valuable, not the characters, which is fascinating.
Well, and I'll say this for Albert Popwell, I think they're right.
Yeah.
Because he's great in every single role he is in all of these movies.
Yeah, but it's interesting that's their idea of continuity. It's off-screen continuity, not on-screen continuity that they're concerned with. And here's where we're back full circle to the beginning of the podcast. We're back to Sonny.
Do you know why Sonny's in the movie?
No, I don't think I want to know, do I?
Probably not. But according to John Milius, that sex scene was added because Clint Eastwood at the time was receiving so many letters from Asian women that contained sexual propositions.
Oh, God. Well, I mean, that's partly that, and sexism is why that she's represented as just freely available, throwing herself at Clint, building his reputation as a sex symbol as well. I like seeing Harry's home life in this scene. I think there is a sort of it feels like a departure from what we've seen. This is the
but I like seeing
side.
how minimalist it is.
Yeah, I like the fact that he might be this guy
because it's like a studio.
Right. Women throw themselves at him, but when he goes home, all he's got is leftover takeout burgers and a couple of beers.
Right.
And it's a very unglamorous idea of bachelorhood.
Right.
I think is part of poking holes in the veneer that this movie does so well.
Well, and also because now that he's lost his wife, he's not going to care about another person in that way. He cares about the victims, I think. That's what his life's all wrapped up in.
Right.
Which,
except
maybe that
movie
speaks to why he didn't end up quitting. It's like, I can't quit. This is all I do. This is my life.
Except what's great about this movie is he would have killed all the victims himself if he was given the chance.
Yes, right.
It's making it. It's after he's had sex with Sonny, it's made clear that he is doing it not to further the cause of interracial romance, but more so he can say he's had sex with an Asian woman. Because he says that's 2 firsts.
If right.
So, and I was very interested as well. It felt, obviously this movie's pushing the envelope on screen violence, but it felt very restrained in terms of nudity.
Yeah.
Given what else you might see at this point in 70s cinema, like Mean Streets, where there's full bush, walking around the frame. It's
and here, the hair is...
Let's keep it shadowy. Yeah. Let's keep it half lit. It feels more like
she glides under the covers.
It's like softcore erotica here. It's that kind of feel. So I thought it was funny.
I also think it's a little bit interesting that it seems as though after that scene that it's almost become kind of a little regular thing. She's she's going to the mailbox for him, like, you know what I mean?
She's buying him 50 beers from the store, which will last him a couple hours. And then this is where I first sort of tightrope when he invites her in and he's acting like a serial killer. But after that, I think is it his partner who someone says maybe it's Harry who's doing all this, because they're exactly the kind of people he would murder. Yes. And that's when I thought, it's like, oh, he said there's a movie in which you might not know that, you might think it was Harry who was committing all these murders.
Yeah, right.
I was like, oh, that movie is Tightrope.
Yeah, exactly.
So he goes on and does that movie. So clearly this idea is something that he's kind of this villain, and then you get, the classic villain victim slippage.
Mm-hmm.
The targets are the same people that you would see as the villains in the last movie.
Right.
They're going to be the victims of violence. I love that when they're tailing the car from the dock, it's the most 70s sequence I have ever seen in any movie. It's a car chase. They go from a warehouse that says imported foods. The music is funk.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Just like exactly what you want from a 70s police procedural.
It's good times.
And it's San Francisco, which, as you say, streets of San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously Bullet.
Yeah.
So, which is, I know, 60s, but leads into the 70s.
Sure. I know what comes after the 60s.
But
and
again,
right around here, we're getting to the murder in the high rise, right?
Yeah, and this is also the part of the movie where I started to realize what you were saying about it being influential in terms of future action cinema.
Mm-hmm.
Like the character, his partner early, who's like a lily-livered partner of color paired with a maverick cop.
Right.
I mean, that's Lethal Weapon.
Oh, and 48 Hours.
Yeah, and then later when he invites him to his house to for dinner for his family, I'm like, well, that scene's in Lethal Weapon, so we don't get there because he dies.
In this movie, he says, "I'll take a rain check. I got to do something else."
It's like, ask me again in 1987.
I'm not saying no because you're black.
Except he absolutely is, because then he'd have to go to that all-black neighborhood that he lives in. So yeah, the high-rise murder. It's so camp and colorful.
It is.
It's like we're in, Batman 66 or Barbarella for like a few minutes.
You're not wrong.
And then, speaking of, I have to put in the Bond movie plug. What is it about early 70s movies and women falling from high rises?
Yes.
That's a Diamonds Are Forever move right there.
No.
And it's yeah, so I mean, it's interesting.
For those of you playing at home, 52 minutes in.
And the representation is, it's like bisexuality, free love, drugs.
Yeah.
So obviously, because it's San Francisco, but it also shows that even if the politics of this movie are moving more left, it still thinks hippies are
bad.
Fuckheads. Yeah. Hippie, permissive culture is still bad.
Right.
But how we deal with it.
Well, and it's kind of vague, isn't it? I mean, you get that the cops are watching this guy.
Right.
You get that he's supposed to be important because he's clearly in charge in the bedroom. But like, who is he?
Right.
Don't know. You have that kind of weird, strange moment where the murderer crashes into another car, which draws all kinds of attention, and then he just goes into the building and kills him anyway. To me, that's a reason to abort. And then my big question for you, I can't figure out, was Mitchell Ryan a part of the team and then they used him as a patsy?
No.
Or
I think he's a total red herring.
Just completely.
Yeah.
And he just happened to be at the building?
He's on his way. He's the designated patrol cop.
Okay.
I think.
Because the cops see each other in the basement, and he's like,
Well, he's just like, he's like.
So I didn't know if it was it's not the murderer, it's just a cop, or it's, hey, did you get done with that business we were planning?
Maybe there is that ambiguity there, but because it's never mentioned again, I assumed that it was just pure opportunism and being found out. Because him being at the scene is a huge problem.
Right.
And a twist for us as the viewers who suspects that Mitchell Ryan is.
And the one thing they do is, I mean, they absolutely show David Soul. You know, he walks out of the building and he's sweating up a storm, and like, boy, I just barely got out of there.
Right.
So.
And also, it creates a narrative obstacle to Harry finding out who's really doing the murders, which is, I think that's good screenplay.
Yeah, no, because I like that moment of seeing him after telling his boss, and whenever Harry's talking to his bosses, the movie is always saying Harry's right.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this moment where they say, "You're wrong, shithead," and he's like, "What?" So that's interesting.
Yeah, and Harry, it's interesting. It's interesting that depending on who he's talking to, Harry's politics change.
Yeah.
So when he's talking to Mitchell Ryan, like you say, he sounds like he basically sounds like a civilian police officer, someone who's never been out in the field. And then later on in the movie, when he talks to Hal Holbrook, who is portrayed as a liberal boss, he basically schools him on what liberalism really means, which is a fascinating moment in Clint Eastwood's career. If he was like running for political office and you wanted to do like a dirty, like a smear campaign on him, I would use that clip. Clint Eastwood tells you he's a conservative, but here's what he said in 1973.
All right. Well, let's take another break, and then... Does the coronavirus have you feeling oogie? Have you been sitting on your couch for weeks? Nay, have you been sitting on there for months? Well, it's time for you to get back in shape. Check out 2AT Fitness. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on Facebook. 2AT Fitness was started by Tina Bernard. She is ready and raring to go to help you get back into the shape you want to get into. They've got all kinds of classes. They've got outdoor in-person classes. They've got online classes if that's what you prefer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get back in shape. You're going to find a variety of exercises. You're going to have strength training, cardio, weightlifting, even fun 5-minute burnouts that will push you to your limits. So get off the couch, get into shape. Go ahead and check out 2AT Fitness. Tina Bernard has got you for all your needs. I know her personally. She's fantastic. You're not going to meet a better person to help you become the new you. Check it out. We're back once again, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here. We're going to finish up talking about Magnum Force, the Ted Post movie. Ted Post. Give that guy some credit.
Pro Post.
Yeah. Now, I think narratively we're starting to get into the area with this B story that ends up becoming important with the cop shootout on the range.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. This is it's great because
I dig it so much.
It's a great set piece because it's. Well, I think we know at this point, don't we? It's a battle of wits with the villain.
Right.
But it's
and
also
what I love, I like a lot of this in the sense of, even in the first Dirty Harry movie, like one of the first things you see Scorpio shoot this woman in a pool. Then you see...
Hippies are bad, everyone.
Yeah. You see Harry Callahan show up. The woman's lying on the ground. She's got a bullet that's gone through her. But the first thing he does is look over at the skyscraper that's next to that building and go, that there's these moments where you see the machinations of his brain.
Yeah. I periodically forget that his rank as inspector
Right.
and that he's a detective, because so much is made of basically, the police brutality side of his job,
Yeah.
the extra legal side of his job. You forget that he is a sleuth.
Yeah.
And this is a great example of that.
And this
because
shows
he's
his intelligence at work in a way that
Right.
he's willing to give up something that you got to think is pretty important to him. He's never lost.
Right, but he knows if he loses, he could potentially get the forensic evidence he needs to nail
Right.
the killer. Incidentally, I'm only talking about Sean Connery Bond films in this podcast, but Goldfinger, the golf course.
Yeah,
I
right.
saw that on the big screen recently, and I definitely saw it's the same.
Oh,
It's definitely the.
you saw it on the big screen? You gotta
did,
tell me when these things are happening. I keep.
Well, this was in the UK. I didn't think you wanted to fork out for
You're right.
tickets. But it's also a little bit subversive because it reminds you that all of this is going on under the watchful eye of the police hierarchy.
Of the police department itself, right.
That they're encouraging the kind of behavior that is resulting in multiple murders across the city.
Right.
I think it's fantastic. It reminds you that these criminal actions are institutionalized, right?
Mhm.
These aren't mavericks.
They're
part
sanctioned.
of a Yeah, and I think later on they even, like Harry even says, it's a sub-organization within the police.
Well, and something really happens interesting after this, like the raid on what's his name, Palancho's place.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this series also has a Godfather fetish.
Yeah, it does.
Which also makes me like it because.
Well, when we get to Sudden Impact.
Well, do you know who this mobster is?
Palancio?
In the Godfather movies? Yeah.
Oh, remind me.
Bruno Tattaglia.
Oh, shit.
The guy who kills... he's only in one scene, The Godfather. He kills Luca Brasi.
Brasi, yeah.
Yeah. That's Bruno
No
Tattaglia.
wonder he looks familiar to me. I should have looked it up.
He looks a little bit like Joseph Cotton as well, which always puts me off. And he's eating Chinese food, which seems to me to be a very explicit Godfather pull. Sudden Impact is more so, but this is 73.
Yeah.
And I know, again, Godfather was an instant hit, but it's that's a great callback for 1 year after it came out.
That's great.
But anyway, carry on, sorry.
Well, and so, I mean, you have this, it's a set piece, obviously, but I also think it's interesting in terms of what's going on in Harry's brain, because he knows, we're cluing into what he knows. So did he set Tim Matheson up? Was that by design? Because he does not give a shit.
No, he doesn't. He obviously thinks it's a possibility, right?
Right.
That it could go down that way. I agree with you. There is that note of ambiguity there. About, again, what we do throughout this movie, we question Harry's heroism, which is why it's such an interesting sequel.
Right.
Because the first movie never questions it. And then, I'm pretty sure that's Clint hanging onto the hood of that car.
It is. He did all his own stunts.
Well, that's it. You can tell from the movie. It's like at no point is that anyone other than Clint Eastwood hanging on there.
Yeah.
And the credibility that lends to the movie.
It's unbelievable.
It really is. It's just fantastic. And then there's the Godfather stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great... Is it in this scene or the previous scene where we get a fantastic overhead shot from Ted Post? Is it the previous... There's a scene in the station house or here? It's like a Hitchcock overhead shot.
Which one?
I don't know.
What are we looking at? The precinct?
I think it's in the precinct, yeah.
Okay.
Again, Ted Post is really brilliant. Yeah. And then after the scene where Harry's getting stitched up, another great one-scene character, that sassy doctor.
I know. Right.
And the rest of the black people in this movie, Early is a bit of a damp squib.
I'm trying to remember, would that be the same?
The prostitute and the pimp. So I'm really glad we get this.
Yeah.
This First of all, playing a professional, but also someone with a bit of attitude.
Yeah.
And a bit of
and I'm trying to remember now. because I'm remembering a doctor. There's a black doctor in the first movie too, who stitches him up
maybe it's the
after
same
that
guy.
hot dog. I don't know if it's the same guy though.
It's not guaranteed with this series,
Right.
But it could be, or it could just be. Maybe he was played by Albert Popplewell in the first film, and now he's. But we get to what is like a. I think this is the only thing I knew about this movie before seeing it was this scene in the parking garage, which I've seen somewhere.
Oh, really? Okay.
With the line of patrol cop bikes.
Well, and that scene, talk about Ted Post, the way that's put together and shot, and the shadow and the.
It's fantastic.
It's so good.
And you know the way that scene is written is also terrific, because they relate it to real events that are going on in Brazil.
Yeah.
They talk about the
Those
death
squads
in Brazil.
And Harry mentions it, once before that too, with his partner.
Right. Or maybe that's when it happens. But it was fast. The moment I think I knew this film was that it was no fluke that it was entering into these questions. That it was asking these questions. I think is it David Soul or Tim Matheson's dead, so I think it must be David Soul. He said, "Do you know how hard it is to prosecute a cop?"
Yeah.
Now I've just been watching We Own the City, the new David.
I haven't
Simon
started it yet.
Miniseries. I'm not going to blow anything from it, but it's it's about police corruption and brutality in Baltimore over the past 10 years. This is the same. These are the same questions, the same discourses that were like cops acting above and beyond the law, and the same dilemma.
Right.
We live in a culture that's
for those trying to take them down. Yeah.
It's like a culture that's enabling it.
Right.
And the fact that they're hitting on this in 1973 in a Dirty Harry sequel is nothing short of incredible.
That's one of the things that makes this movie this movie has to be at the top of your list.
Yeah.
Because
I love how it's filmed as a trial, like almost like a trial scene.
Yeah.
Like it's Harry's heroism on trial. If he sides with them at this point, he is no longer our hero.
Right.
If he challenges them, he remains our hero. It's so good.
Well, but when you add on top of that, like, will he agree because he thinks he's in danger, so he'll just shine them on?
Yeah.
And then you have that line where he says, I think you've mistaken me, boys, or like you've got, what is, he's got a great line in that moment. And you think, Jesus Christ, what are you doing? Are they going to kill him right there and then? And they don't. And at first I'm wondering, why are you making that choice? But the next scene reveals that, a perfect, excuse as to why they just go on their merry way.
Yeah.
But you're right in the sense of, because Harry has already said, hey, you killed that mobster. Couldn't have happened to a better guy.
Right, save the taxpayers a lot of money.
Right. And so you wonder where Harry's going to lie, and now he's going to firmly plant himself on one side.
Yeah. But
like Harry does what Harry does, but
he's going to let his partner die for it.
Yeah. Right. Oh man, sometimes isn't it funny when you watch these older movies before cell phones and you see the Bakelite phone and you're like, fuck man, he's even got to just.
Well, he's
got to wait for that wheel to go back.
I love the fact that apropos of nothing, he just hangs up. Like, you don't know where this guy is. Like, he could be coming from the shower. Like, it's like, keep on the line. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, because it's a feature of the first, it's already a pre-written convention in the first movie, isn't it? Harry already has the reputation that his partners die.
Right.
In Dirty Harry itself.
Yeah.
And they've turned it into a sequel convention where it's something that's going to happen in every movie. Mm-hmm. Either his partner's going to get injured or die.
Yeah.
Or a combination thereof.
Right.
And it's sort of interesting. Like, you almost feel like they're going to go in the other direction, and that Early's going to survive the movie, and then he very definitely does not.
Yeah. Right.
So there is a little bit of play with this formula,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's only the second movie, and it only becomes a formula when we do it twice. But by going down that route, it almost kind of hamstrings the rest of the movies that they have to do some variation of this.
Yeah.
Because they're even doing a poll at the beginning of the movie, aren't they, as to how long Early's going to survive.
Right. It's a
So
running gag.
It's very self-aware
Yeah.
that this is a convention of the series.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, another fantastic like fisheye from below from Ted Post. I think I've got more camera notes than I've ever had for any
Which
other
one?
movie. Of Harry and the Magnum. It's like a fisheye.
Yeah.
Of below of the Magnum.
Right. It works better than the fisheye of Jim Carrey
God.
when they're filming that video.
And we find out, the final twist of the movie.
Now, were you fooled?
I hadn't. Well, why would you think Briggs was
Okay.
in charge? Or did you, when you first saw this, do you remember? Were you
I
fooled into
can't
thinking-
remember because it was so long ago.
I mean,
I don't remember my initial reaction.
I bought that Hal Holbrook was his liberal boss
Yeah.
who was so much of a bureaucrat that he would never do anything like this.
Okay.
And even Harry says that. He's like, how is this you? How are you in charge of all this?
Yeah.
He doesn't really give him an explanation, but I think it's good screenplay construction. I like that we layer the villains throughout.
I like that he.
And
I like that he shows up at his apartment.
by that point, it's pretty obvious what's going
Yeah.
on to the audience.
But I love it when he's walking outside and he says, "You drive, will you? I want to take a look at this thing." And my first thought is, Harry, God damn it. Why? The general audience is knowing what's going on. You should too, sir.
Absolutely. And then we get this car chase fight combo, which is the ultimate 70s action sequence.
Yeah.
Like French Connection length.
Yeah.
I think it's like French Connection kind of it raised
Well,
the bar
when you
on
think of Bullet,
car chase,
and
they have to be a certain length and a certain
Right,
scale
yeah.
after the French Connection.
so
right?
when you have Bullet and you have
Bullet.
French Connection, like these are the standards that these movies are going to be. And I got to tell you, but my note is this is a damn good car chase.
It really is.
Yeah.
And
Oh, and the
It's a
ending.
it's a
That
damn
head-on
good-
collision? I
Yeah.
forgot about that. I was like, that's fucking harsh. Even for an assassin.
I've got a note here that this movie ends in the same location, maybe even the same set as Escape from the Planet of the Apes.
I mean,
And maybe even Get Carter. Because I think we said at the time
Right.
that it looks like the ship from Get Carter. And it's
but
just
I
like
have
all
the same
these
exact note.
They are all early 70s
Yeah.
pulp movies.
But I
and
have
they're
the same
all
note
ending
where
on a ship.
I'm like major Planet of the Apes vibes right now. Because it
And then-
looks like the same exact place.
And then I hear a little bit of a sitar in the soundtrack, which reminds me of the Jerry Goldsmith score from
Uh-huh.
Escape from Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
The climactic fight scene is underlit, so now I'm thinking about Conquest of the Planet of the Apes and The Godfather. Again, it's just what we did in the early 70s.
Yeah.
And speaking of what we did in the early 70s, we get an Evel Knievel style bike jumping stunt.
Yeah.
It just feels like at this point the movie is throwing everything stunt and action wise at the viewer.
See, but I'm
And
a
again-
little let down by these last.
Oh, I mean, it's very it's elaborate for the sake of elaborate. You could have had one of those and it would have been fine.
Right.
One.
But Harry
one finite
jumping
one.
his motorcycle and he crashes,
Yeah.
which is perfectly reasonable. I'm fine with that.
You sounded like you were really scared of someone saying, "What are you? What are you? An anti-bikeite?"
Right. But, you have this last cop, I think it's David Soul, right? Who
Uh-huh.
falls off the pier, and it's like a 15-foot drop. I'm like, that guy's not dead.
Yeah.
He's not dead. And then
the
other part that the part that really kind of falls flat for me is Briggs saying, "I'm going to convict you with your own justice system."
But this is interesting though. I was listening to a podcast recently about Carrie, where they credited Carrie as being the first instance of a jump scare in a horror film. Is this not a jump scare? And this is 73. I understand looking at it now, it's like, well, of course he's going to come back at the last minute.
Uh-huh.
But
Jump
in 73,
scare, though?
I mean, the other way you can look at it is that they're not thinking in terms of, they're not building a language of horror cinema.
So
they're
I was just going to say...
they're riffing off the Bond movies.
Right.
And how, you know, again,
so it's kind of like, it's a
concept.
jump scare before they realized what a jump scare is.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it's not significant. But it is a little bit, and you got to end with an explosion again because it's
so,
the
and
early
that's the
1970s.
only thing that makes me realize, okay,
Yeah.
like I'm gonna forgive the movie, this character making this terrible unmotivated choice to let Harry live. I'll forgive it because we get the explosion afterwards.
Well, you know, it's just, again, it's like, it's...
And also, we have not given any play
mandatory
to Callahan's signature line from this movie, which is repeated 4 or 5 times, which is, "Man's got to know his limitations."
So that comes from... Is that in the first movie?
Is it? I don't remember it being in
No. Okay, so but that line, that's a redefinition of the character, is it not?
Yeah, right.
I would say that the Dirty Harry of the original movie is a man who does not know his limitations. Because his limitations are, don't use extra legal force against anyone suspected of a crime. So that's a big deal, it seems to me, that line.
Right.
I know it's delivered as a kind of Bond-like one-liner, but the content of it is significant in changing how we see the character. I mean, it won't stay that way, but at least at this point.
Right.
And then I love the...
And we haven't...
watching Harry walk away into the sunset with all the debris around him.
Yeah.
And, you know, the original movie referenced High Noon. This is very much the end of the Searchers.
Searchers, yeah.
Oh, it's just lovely.
Well, and we haven't yet talked about, because when he's in the car with Hal Holbrook, you know, there's that speech about, he admits he doesn't know what to do all the time, but I'm going to work within the system that we've got.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so that's another tick in sort of the remarkable department for this movie.
It really is.
In what it's saying about how it views justice.
Yeah.
You know?
It's... Yeah, I mean, it is a... It treats the first movie as if it's asking a question and giving the answer.
Yeah, right.
It's like yeah, that it might help you nail Scorpio, but what
about after that?
What are the cultural implications
exactly.
of what you're doing? Which is a sophisticated track for a movie, you know, for a movie series that begins with all hippies are evil, you can do whatever the fuck you want to them.
You could even give Elvis a gun.
I only agree with the first part of that statement. We're at the credit check. Now,
so,
I have to tell you...
My next question for you.
I don't even know if this movie has credits. I often like to have something to check.
These movies really like a view from afar, pulling the camera away, roll credits.
I mean, if it wasn't for this podcast where, you know, I get great joy poring over the credits and pulling these nuggets from it, when I saw how this movie ended, I thought it. I went to school.
I want that on a T-shirt.
I thought it. I know. After everything I've said, I've made myself sound so smart. And
You
then
are
I said,
so
"I
eloquent
thought it."
all of the time.
Eloquence has a price, and you might say, "I thought it."
I am delighted that you started this with "I thought it."
There's no point in asking you to cut that, is there?
No. You kidding me? That's your next birthday present.
Next time you do a podcast with Chu, if she ever feels like she doesn't understand something, just remind her that Tom once said on a podcast, "I thought it." But I thought that, like, in an ideal world, this would be what the credits are for every movie. I kind of went, what's wrong with this?
Yeah.
Just the cast names. You never break with the movie.
Well, and was this the movie?
You just end the scene, put the credits over the scene, keep the music going.
Yeah.
You never break from the action or the tone.
Yeah.
Did we go wrong in moving away from this model?
Wasn't this the only movie in the series? You know how they, in the early 70s even, they would do a thing in which you'd see the sort of circular logo for the stamp for the number movie it is, you know? Mm-hmm. And you see it at the beginning credits. I think it was this movie, wasn't it? Because the other movies don't do that.
No.
And that was kind of a joy to see, because when you see that, you know that at the end, not going to be a lot of credits.
Well, because it's ticking down on HBO Max. And you're like, I've got 50 seconds left.
Right.
But yeah. But I think it's also the only one of the 4 movies that doesn't eventually go to a freeze frame.
Yeah, right.
And so in retrospect, I appreciated these credits even more, that it didn't end with a literal postcard.
There you go.
But that's all I have. I don't know if there's anything else.
That's all I have.
Yeah.
It's a good fucking movie.
It's a surprisingly good movie. With a lot of depth and ambiguity.
Because it's funny to me that it's the movie I remembered the least, probably just because it's the movie I saw the least, too. But to go back and see how taken with it I was on this viewing was quite a treat.
Yeah. It was all new to me, but I would not have expected this from the movie that was a follow-up to Dirty Harry.
Mm-hmm.
Some of that is obviously confirmation bias, like its view of the world is closer to mine than the one espoused in Dirty Harry, and I don't want to discount that because, I'm obviously going to get more out of a movie like that, but I think anyone on any side of the political spectrum would respect that there's a political counterpoint to the argument made in the previous movie, and that's what the job of this movie is.
And that's what this movie did, and that's why it's like such an interesting movie.
Yeah, I would go back to this before I would go back to Dirty Harry. I'd get more out of a second viewing of this, I think, than I have done with Dirty Harry in the past.
All right.
Which is not to say, it's got a few problems here and there. There's homophobia. Yeah. There's some issues with how it treats women and sexuality, and there are moments in the movie where it kind of makes clear, no matter what these police officers doing, in the end it's still the fault of the hippies. They drove them to this.
Damn hippies.
But there's also the one moment I didn't mention that I think is remarkable is that having gone to the lengths of villainizing David Soul's character in the way that they do by making him this shadowy serial killer, when he's confronted with the fact that he killed a fellow officer to cover his back, he and maybe this is David Soul's performance as well, seems genuinely, honestly guilty about it.
Yeah.
And so that throws another, that's another log in the fire of now I'm actually sympathizing with the villain, which is something that we just didn't get in the first movie at all.
Right.
There's no way to sympathize with the man
Not
who's
with
holding
Scorpio.
a sing-along whilst kidnapping a
School bus
full
of children.
kids. God bless Andrew Robinson. I love that man so much.
He's so good.
I
was trying to explain to Chew when we were watching Cobra, because he gets to play the asshole fellow cop in that movie.
And of course, Garak in Deep Space Nine, one of the best character style Trek has ever produced.
Yeah. All right.
But that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
We have to talk about the Enforcer next.
Yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to have to tell us what you think of Magnum Force in preparation while we talk to you about the Enforcer coming up next. One of the movies we seem to disagree upon, so it'll be an interesting conversation for us.
It definitely will.
But let us know what you think. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Send us an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. That's it. We'll be back soon with the Enforcer. For Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions, Michael Shantz here of the How Dare You Awards. Until next time, say goodbye to everyone, Tom.
If you ever fall out of line, I'll flop you lower than whale shit. This series has some great put downs.
It really does.
Never mind all that Shakespeare insult stuff. Go to the Dirty Harry
Go
series.
to Dirty Harry.
Find the put down that's right for you.
There is no shortage of them. All right, everyone. Take care.